Subjugation personified haunts the night, a freak of nature the likes of which no man has ever seen. The terror of Tuna Town, stalker of the sacred slit, invader of the hallowed hallway to motherhood. That's right, I'm talking about the nefarious curse of the Knock-Up Fairy! Guys, you don't know what it's like. Millions of women a year, through no actions, no fault of their own, find themselves mysteriously stricken with the effects of the Knock-Up Fairy's curse. Many don't even find out until weeks, even months later, when the more dramatic symptoms begin to show. Bizarre cravings, mood swings, massive swelling.
What will the neighbors think?
And the callous judgment of a society still in denial of the existence of this horrible monster. Why, it's...
Bullshit.
Bullshit.
Oh, bullshit!
Bullshit, man!
This is so stupid!
Okay, so it does help if I unmute when I want to talk, doesn't it?
Generally speaking.
One of these days, I promise you guys, I will do a show without screwing anything up. In the meantime, welcome to Badger Talk 17. Modern women, victims of their own choices. And I am your host, Hannah Wallen, the perpetual fuck-up, victim of my own choices. And I'm here with the Prim Reaper.
You poor thing.
And supposedly Karen will be here, so I'm going to leave her picture in there. And if she doesn't show up, then we'll just shame her for not showing up.
Okay.
In the meantime.
Well, with the seats, it kind of looks like we're just staring
Yes.
at her, waiting impatiently, so...
Yep. And off to the reading. Modern society's habit of treating women as victims of their own choices has led to a plethora of legal and social double standards against men. Much of feminism's activism is based on that habit as well. Prior to changes in English common law, as a result of 19th century feminist activism, the father's legal financial responsibility for the welfare of his family informed custody law in divorce, such that paternal custody was the standard. The same social standards also led to support requirements that, in the rare instance of a man leaving his family because he was going to end up getting shafted, it mandated a maintenance payment from him to his wife and children. As a result of feminist activism, the custody trend was reversed rather than evened out, and custody in the U.S. is now awarded to mothers over 80% of the time. This also results in mothers receiving child support awards more often than fathers. Even when custodial fathers do receive support, they receive less. In cases where the parents never marry, the mother retains custody. The father is presumed a deadbeat, and his presumed obligation is handled accordingly. That is not a result of feminism, but goes back to English poor laws following the economic and social upheaval in the wake of the Great Plague and the dissolution of the monasteries by King Henry VIII, which, in effect, eliminated the church's equivalent of a welfare system and made the extremely poor entirely the government's problem. Not surprisingly, with all those changes, the majority of divorce, approximately 7%, is initiated by women. While feminists fought to eliminate the restrictions and obligations that women faced as wives and mothers prior to the Tender Years Doctrine and equal pay laws, their advocacy didn't include also freeing men from their gender-based restrictions and obligations. This meant that while women made gains in the areas of economic freedom and the labor reform movement's agitation brought about equal pay standards, that didn't lead to any increase in women's financial responsibility toward their families. Women's reproductive options expanded to the degree that today, single custodial motherhood from birth is, by definition, a lifestyle choice over which the woman in question has complete control. Men's options did not change. Social attitudes and the law still place financial responsibility for the family squarely on men's shoulders, often with backbreaking force and at the expense of their relationships with their children. And feminists are using the women as victims of their own choices angle to keep them squarely in that role. Fathers who fight for custody of their children are portrayed as deadbeats and abusers who are only trying to get out of their financial obligations or attempting to hurt the mother by attacking her relationship with her children. Argue that a woman who leaves her marriage, children in tow, is abusing her husband in that manner, and you will most certainly be called a misogynist. Feminists respond to the promotion of paternal surrender, the idea that a man should have the same right of terminating his parental responsibility that safe haven abandonment, adoption, and abortion give to women as, yep, you guessed it, an attack on the mother. The poor thing will have to abort, relinquish custody, or live on welfare. These arguments not only rely on portraying the mother as a victim of her own choice, but treat the father as a perpetrator, regardless of his circumstances or intentions. Reverse the sexes on any feminist arguments against paternal surrender and apply them to any of a woman's vast menu of reproductive choices, and again, you will most certainly be called a misogynist. In fact, you'd get called that for even arguing that women are not owed financial support for the purpose of funding any of those options. Under the women as victims of their own choices narrative of the 21st century, not paying for a woman's lifestyle choices is treated as denial of access to them. Bring up the fact that no equivalent for men is treated in this manner, and you get a lesson in another part of the women as victims of their own choices narrative, the wage gap myth. Allegedly, women only get paid 79 cents for every dollar a man makes for the same work. In reality, the wage gap of feminist imagining just disappeared on me because the screen jumped. For crying out loud. In reality, the wage gap of feminist imagining was not arrived at by comparing pay for the same work, but by comparing the average of all U.S. men's earning with the average of all U.S. women's earnings, without regard to several significant mitigating factors. When you control for such factors as the choice of occupation and industry, achievement in education, and choices and choices related to work-life balance, the gap is clearly shown to not be a wage gap, but an earnings gap. Approximately 7% of it is not accounted for by these factors, but is, according to the CONSAD report, attributable to two unknown degrees to other explanatory factors that have been omitted from the analysis, or to overt discrimination against female workers. In other words, even that is not conclusively proved to be discrimination-based. How did feminists respond to learning that their sacred woozle had been debunked? They blamed society, of course. Despite the big push of the second wave being the idea that women can and should abandon their homemaker and caregiver roles for the workplace, today's feminists argue that women just cannot do that, but are obligated, forced even, to sacrifice their careers to the gods of home and hearth. Some will even refer to their lifestyle choices as unpaid labor, as if their employer owes them a pay raise at work because they cook and clean at home. Argue that such assertions are tantamount to demanding payment from their employers for their lifestyle choices, and yet again that misogyny card will be thrown down. Why? Because, as you well know, and if you don't, any feminist will find a carefully worded alternate route to telling you. Modern women are victims of their own choices, and expecting them to benefit the consequence, or to accept the consequence of those choices along with their benefits, well, that's victim blaming.
And that's just terrible.
Yes, and that's the way it is.
That whole unpaid labor thing really just gets my knickers in a twist, because honestly, nobody's forcing you to clean your house. If you want to live in a pigsty, go ahead and do that. But it's called being an adult.
Clean
Single
your
men
room.
have to, yeah, seriously, single men have to take care of their home as well. unless they just don't care, in which case they don't. But it's something that everybody has to do. You're not special for doing housework. It's cost of living. Deal with it.
There are actually feminist comics and feminist articles and all kinds of arguments on Twitter and Facebook dedicated to this, where they'll turn around and, well, if I do these things at home, well, my husband expects me to take care of my mother-in-law. Well, society expects me to do this and that. And the reality is, if you are a strong, independent individual, and genuinely a strong, independent individual, you have the capacity to use this really valuable vocabulary word. And it's not all that complicated. No isn't even a very long word. It's one syllable and two letters. Learn to say it.
Yeah, no kidding. Like, and people in the chat are actually talking about what about the male household tasks as well? Like, oftentimes women aren't expected to do car maintenance or repair things that get broken around the house. And certainly some of them do. But if any of them tried to complain about unpaid labor in that context, it's just like, call a maintenance person then in that case, and then you'll have to pay them to do it. And then there won't be any unpaid labor. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, auto tech, a certified auto tech, gets paid a significant amount more per hour than a dishwasher. I'm not certified, but I'm like, okay, I'm a little weird. And my idea of a fun date is to work on the car with my husband, because I get to learn something new from the
Mhm.
coolest person I know. So
Aw.
it's like there's no lose there. I mean, you get dirty, but you can, that's what the shower is for. Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's fun, but and it's hard, which makes it even more fun because then you're overcoming a challenge and everything, right? But if it was something that I was doing it because I had to do it, and then I had to do it because we couldn't pay to have things done and so on, and it was expected of me, and it was never appreciated when it was done, and if I didn't figure out, because a lot of times when something's wrong with the car, um,
Mhm.
there are 4 or 5 different functions in the car that could go wrong, could be problematic or whatever, that could cause the thing that's not happening to not happen, or the thing that is happening to happen. And it's kind of a, you got to go digging and looking to see, which of those things has occurred. And if you don't figure out the right one first, because you're driving an old, like I drive a 1994 Plymouth Grand Voyager.
Yeah.
And it's painted to look like a zombie because it is a zombie. It's survived car accidents, and it's got dings, and it's like, so every time something goes wrong with it, we have to fix 2 or 3 things before we get the right one. And I can imagine,
Well,
can you imagine being a guy and the wife, every time he goes out and spends a few hours in the summer heat or the winter cold, because it's not as much fun getting under there on a sheet of ice,
yeah.
fixing the car, and then it's still making that noise, and the wife's like, "You didn't do anything!"
Oh
As
God.
opposed to you go into the kitchen and you put the dishes in the dishwasher, because almost everybody has one now, or you take a sponge or a rag or a brush or whatever and you scrub them and you set them out to dry. And if you haven't done a good job at that, once in a while there's something on one of the forks. Big deal. It's not like you were out laying on a dirty garage floor or on pavement doing
Yeah.
this
Well,
work in the heat and the cold and the rain.
exactly. And they're often so unappreciative of that. Like, it's not hard to put the dishes in the dishwasher or to put the laundry in the laundry machine or the dryer, or a lot of times women just aren't doing those harder jobs, and a lot of the time I'm also seeing a sizable lack of appreciation for what their husbands are doing around the house.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not true of everybody, but it's true probably 9 times out of 10 in the relationships that I see.
Yeah, and
But, maybe if you want to cut off the wage gap that you mentioned earlier, maybe she can go in and take the job as a mechanic or a repair person, and then okay, all of a sudden she can get paid to do that unpaid labor she hates so much.
yeah, well, and then there's the other aspect of it, in addition to taking, like, men take jobs that are I've started calling them D-grade jobs because there's a word that starts with a D to describe almost every single one of them. They can be dangerous, they can be dirty, they can be disgusting, they can be dismal,
Degrading.
degrading. Yeah, there's work that's quite degrading that people don't think of, and there are not as many jobs that women take that are degrading. Even the jobs that feminists consider degrading, the women who do them are often the most important people in the job, and they get treated as such. And men who work in the male equivalent of that position, aren't. Like porn stars and models, where feminists have this pretense that this is degrading work. You definitely don't see the same treatment of men and women. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and of course, it's more likely for men to take heavy factory work than women. It's more likely for men to take work that has them dealing with something that can kill them immediately if they fuck up, whereas women are more likely to take work that can leave somebody else hanging if they fuck up. Like, you see more women as nurses aides and nurses, and you see more men in terms of the higher level of that profession. You see more men as doctors and particularly specialists. Um, you also see more men working in positions like there's a job to climb up radio towers and change the
Yeah.
light bulb that prevents the airplane from hitting the radio tower. There aren't very many women out there that, like, I didn't know that job existed until I started looking into this stuff. I probably would have looked at that job when I was in college because I love climbing things. But although there's some dangers with that job that most people don't think of, like lightning.
Yeah.
And women take jobs that are more in a safe environment. They're indoors. They're more likely to be in a position where somebody else is there to protect them, or somebody else is there to watch out for them. There's more safety measures, and more women were interested in entering the workplace after the United States started passing work safety laws. And that, they started getting children out of the workplace. They started requiring safety measures in factories, and women suddenly were much more interested in that work. So yeah, and women are less likely to take multiple jobs, whereas a man is more likely to take multiple jobs. Women are less likely to work overtime hours. They're less likely to work the night shift. They're more likely to try to work their schedule around their child's school schedule, and so on. Yeah, they're gonna earn less money.
Yeah.
And I consider opposition to there being different pay between women and men under that circumstance, where a woman who works less hours, won't come in at night, won't work overtime, says I can't work weekends, or I gotta only work during my kids' school hours, or things like that, doesn't stay on the job for years and years without taking time off for things like vacations and having babies and stuff like that. She's going to earn less. And women that oppose that difference are really opposing merit pay. They're opposing paying men for working harder, longer, taking more risks for the employer, providing a greater value in those areas in the workplace.
Oh, definitely. And it's ridiculous how often I see people making arguments like, "Oh, all I'm doing is raising the children of the future or teaching the children of the future. That should be equally as important as one doctor, right? Why am I not getting paid for what I'm doing?" And it's like they're completely missing the point because
Yeah.
a lot of men do those things as well, right? But men also do the harder, difficult, degrading jobs that they don't want to do. And somebody working in the sewers, obviously you have to pay them a certain amount in order to entice them to take that job. And also, somebody has to do it. And most of the time, that's a man. If a woman wanted to take those jobs, I'm sure that there would be no roadblocks set up in front of her, but somehow I don't see them lining up to take those kinds of jobs.
Yeah, just go down there, put your hip waders on and your your
Yeah.
jumpsuit, and go break up some fatbergs. Um, there's a
Oh, yeah, no
news
kidding.
story came out not too long ago about one in London that had a sewer clogged up badly. That I guess it's a record-breaking size, and they're considering putting it in a museum. So not only do the men that have to deal with that have to get it out of the way so that the sewage can continue moving down the line,
Yeah.
they might actually have to salvage it rather than just breaking it up, destroying it, and letting it go. Like, oh yeah, this is disgusting. Let's keep it. Which
Yeah.
it's interesting, so I can understand. People probably want to gawk at it, but still, ew. Which is why
Well,
women don't do that stuff very much.
yeah, and I mean, somebody just asked in the chat, like, would we take those jobs? Like, I know I personally, probably I would not want to take that job, but I'm also not complaining about the pay that I'm getting for the jobs that I do. Like in when I was,
Of
I was
course, you say
still
doo doo in the midst of
doo
discussing the
doo.
sewers.
Oh, God damn it, unintentional. But thank you for pointing it out. But yeah, I was actually doing a painting job in the previous city that I lived in. Funny enough, I was just basically working a fast food job just to get some of the extra bills. And somebody saw me running around, and he's like, "How would you like to come and work for me instead?" And basically asked what he did, and he said house painting, and it was not really something that I had any experience with, and I really had no idea what I was walking into, but I thought, why not? It could be something fun. And he didn't treat me like a woman. He's like, I'm gonna give you all the same tasks that I give myself, that I give to my other, he had another male worker at the time, but there was no pandering, and that was the way I wanted. Because I mean, it was tough at first. Like, we were doing stuff like oil painting the ceilings and scraping popcorn off ceilings and sanding walls, doing all the sorts of standard things that you do with painting, but it was really rewarding when I actually got pretty good at it, and now that's a skill that I have for the rest of my life. And even though I'm not currently doing that for work, recently bought a house and I repainted the entire thing. And it's, if you want to take these better paying jobs, these more skilled jobs, then there's nothing stopping you. Just go out and do it. Just stop pretending like you're being held back because of your gender or something like that, because 9 times out of 10 you're not.
No, well, and like I've done jobs before that can be very disgusting. I mean I've cleaned up people's puke and scrubbed toilets for a living, so
Mhm.
and that was not so bad. I was indoors when I'm doing that, and I've got a caregiver kind of nature. I like to do the tasks involved in providing care for people. So that's kind of one of the things I'm suited for. And
Mhm.
I've done photography. I've worked in the snow. I've actually photographed football games during the playoff season in the snow, high enough that it covered my feet. Where if I didn't dress warm enough, and there was one night when I shot a game in Kenton, Ohio, in the snow, um, that I couldn't feel my feet at all, except for it felt like I was walking on my bones by the end of the game.
Ooh,
Ended up
ouch.
with a little bit of frostbite there.
Oh,
And I mean,
no.
I've done stuff like that, and it's that one I did because I was passionate about the job. I've
Mhm.
worked multiple jobs. I've, and if during the time period when I was the breadwinner for our family because my husband's uh, income was essentially being confiscated by the government to pay his ex-wife to not work, I would have if I'd have had the opportunity to take a job like that, and they'd have said, "Yeah, this is going to pay twice what you're making right now." I'd do it.
Yeah, I bet.
It would feed my family, and we needed it. It would if it would feed my family. Yeah, I'd do it. The biggest problem I had was at that time. I was dealing with, I was working 3 jobs and he was going to school full time and working full time, but his take home was less than a regular part time job because the ex wife, you know.
Yeah, and that sort of thing shouldn't happen.
Right, right. And that was the situation, which really goes into the next thing, the victims of your own choices in terms of custody and marriage. A woman
Yeah.
leaves her husband and she takes the kids and then she says, "But I need to be a stay-at-home mom and he could be making more money." The state comes along and says, "Yes, you should be making more money and we're going to base your child support on imputed income. We're going to say you should be making X thousand dollars a year, even though you're making half of X, and we're going to base your child support on that, and you're going to pay about twice what you should be paying." Ohio does this, and then they can only take a percentage of what you actually make out of your check, but they can treat you like you're not paying, like you're withholding income from your ex if
Yeah, and that's
if
disgusting.
you don't pay the rest. So the weirdest
Well, plus,
experience I had out of that was, I every year I got a letter.
yeah.
When tax time came around, we would do our tax return, and they're allowed to take his percentage of the refund that you get. And of course, our income was low enough that we did get a refund. We got taxed at a higher rate than we owed. And there was well, actually 2 years that they basically, I had to sign every year that they could take it because we filed jointly. But there were 2 years that they took the entire thing, and they sent me paperwork that said, that I had to sign for them to take the whole thing. That I was called by the caseworker for that child support order, that child support obligation, who basically said, if you don't agree to this, I'm going to put him in jail for non-payment, even though he's paying, because he's not paying as much as we think he should be paying. But the paperwork I had to sign that I was not coerced.
Oh my
Oh, and
god.
and Joey Jojo sent us $5 and says, looking at Kat Dennings to figure out how I want my real doll or girlfriend robot to look like, thinking Nick and Nora of season one, Two Broke Girls Cat. I don't know Two Broke Girls, but hey, at this point, there's actually a lot of men that are talking like that. That why deal with real women when they do stuff like that? And
No,
I
I
have
mean,
no argument. I can't really blame anybody at this point.
yeah,
And
no.
as much as I want to talk about companionship, you can't I can't argue that you're going to have companionship with somebody that you can't trust. I would say judging character is the vital thing.
Oh, of
And
course.
and I know that society says you're not allowed. My contention is that you should do it anyway. But yeah, the situation basically is, so this judge treats the ex-wife as a victim. She's so in such dire financial straits because she's not working. The poor thing doesn't have a job and she's got these 2 kids to take care of all by herself through no fault of her own, even though she's the one that left. And that's women, victim of their own choices.
Well, and half of the time, the women who are getting that child support payment are under actual no obligation to prove that they've spent it on their children. So, you could have this woman, she could have been spending it on jewelry for all you know, and there's nothing that they would have done about it. There
Yeah,
was actually a
that's
discussion about that going on in the Discord a couple days ago. They were talking about it, and they were saying, well, why should a man be under any obligation to pay this when there's no obligation for the woman to spend it on the children? And I thought, I don't see the flaw in that. People say, oh, the children need the extra support. But what if the children aren't getting the actual support? Because it's not often the children who are dictating how the money is getting spent. Like, there's no guarantee that she's spending it on money or clothes or school supplies for the children. Maybe if she were required to provide receipts, or even if the father could pay child support in the form of these goods that the child actually needs just to show that the child is the one being supported, then that would be different. But a lot of the times that's not the case, and I don't think that that's fair at all. That just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, this is something that, like Ohio actually has a way they could handle this because you don't get. It used to be that the state would send the mother a check, and then the mother would deposit the check or cash the check or whatever. The state now sends the mother a card. It's like a credit card. They do this with food stamps. They do it with you have an actual. If you're disabled and you're on Medicaid, if I understand right, you have an actual card. I think if you're not disabled and you're on Medicaid because you're poor, you get a piece of paper. But I haven't seen any of those in so long. I don't know, but I do know that the child support is attached to a card that works like a credit card, and it's easy to track the spending on that. Um, Let's see. Hoki Bukisa says, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Sent us $4.20 and says, VR futa porn is the future. Sex dolls are lame. Well, it
Different
is true.
strokes for different
There
folks.
we go. And different strokes for different folks' strokes. So, but in any case, you guys are gonna all like pay to make me say weird shit now, right? Um,
And then
if you don't
Allison
know
just
what
kind of
futas are,
joins
everybody,
in.
I'm not explaining it because I'm not your mom. But
Is that normally something that your mom would explain to you?
you would not believe the stuff that I've explained to my kids because I'm the one that's not uncomfortable. I have no filter, so sometimes I pretend to have a filter just to be kind of normal. But
Yeah.
and Michael Keller is encouraging everybody send super chats to make Hannah say weird shit. Great.
And then Allison just rubs her hands in the background.
Yes, and this is me, victim of my own choices. I just let everybody know how to make me say weird shit.
Hey, there you go.
So now we're gonna get paid for it. Poor us. I don't know how we'll handle the money. But yeah, they put it on a card. It's easy to trace, and honestly, it's not misogynistic. It's not an attack on the custodial parent to say, since you have chosen to take responsibility for your children and you have asked that your children's other parent help to fund that responsibility in a way that facilitates you working less outside the home. You are accountable. You are the steward of that child's income because it is the child's income. It is not the mother's income
Yeah,
according to state. Now, the mother has to pay
child
taxes
support.
on it. The recipient of the support on behalf of the child pays taxes on it out of the household income, and they don't have to fill out a separate tax form for the child. But you do have a situation there where you are the steward of income spent on behalf of that person's welfare. And yeah, you should have to be accountable for that. I have responsibility at times for uh, the funds allotted to buy groceries for people under my care as a direct caregiver for intellectually disabled adults. And I have all
Mhm.
kinds of documentation I have to do because of that. If I go to the grocery store, I have like two or three separate forms of paperwork that I have to fill out. Plus I have to keep the receipt, and the
Yeah.
paperwork has to be filled out in a very specific state mandated manner and all that stuff. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that has custody of their kids should have to go that complicated, but you should
Well,
damn well be
no.
able to show that you are stewarding that money accountably if it ever
Yeah.
comes up in question. And it's
If you're
not,
accepting
yeah,
money from somebody else for something, then you should be able to prove that you're using it for that.
yeah,
And if
whether you're a
not, then that's
custodial mother or a custodial father, I would say. And,
exactly. Yeah.
like foster parents have to do that too.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Again, like it makes sense that this should be tracked. And anybody who tries to say that this is misogynistic, it's like, well, maybe if you have a problem getting free money from your ex, then maybe you should rethink your wording of your word choice of misogynistic, because That's not what it's for. And
Yeah.
it shouldn't be free for the mother to do whatever she wants with. That's not what the purpose is. Ugh, it just drives me nuts.
No, it's definitely a situation of far less accountability um, for the mother, and this is something like if a guy has custody, the mother doesn't have as high of a child support payment to make most of the time. And there are more often times when the father has custody and doesn't receive child support that there's not a child support order on the mother. And it's
Yeah.
partly
I
because men are less likely to be on welfare as custodial parents than women.
Yeah, I actually, my dad actually got custody of me, and he didn't ask for any child support from my mom.
And that's a frequent thing. Men are more likely to have an independent source of income. Men are more likely to have a full-time job. Men are more likely to be at or above the poverty level than women who have custody of their children. They're more likely to be at the higher income levels than women who have custody of their children. They're less likely to have uh, multiple children by different mothers than the other way around. They're less likely to live on welfare. They're less likely to be below the poverty level. They're less likely to only work part time without having an alternate source of income, so on. So there's a big difference in the handling of custody. And Joey Jojo sent us $2 and says, "I hate being male. It fucking sucks." And my answer to that is it shouldn't. Um, and
Yeah,
that's one
it's
of the
not fair
reasons.
that
That's one of the reasons why we fight.
yeah, because hopefully eventually people will realize the bullshit that's going on, and we can all start making strides towards fixing that. But
Ryan
ugh,
Field sends us $2 and wants to know, may we use Super Chat to shamelessly self-promote? Um, well,
I don't see why
I don't see
not.
why not. As long as you're not self-promoting something that we can't
Is it
say on
legal?
YouTube,
Yeah.
but I don't see why not.
I mean,
So,
we're basically not monetizing anymore anyway, right? So
right.
as long as it's not illegal, pretty much anything goes.
Yep. And Lacey Lynn says, uh, sends us $10 and says, new to Honey Badger live streams. Just sending to share my support. Also, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I can't believe the amount of disrespect of men and their responsibilities that is so rampant. And that was something that people called my mom a stay-at-home mom. She really wasn't. She did a lot of things. She was a substitute teacher. She was on our city council. She was an activist for the Miami area canal system. So she was very active in the community, and I will bet you are too. But this is something that stay-at-home parents, whether it's the mom or the dad, that dedicate their time specifically to the children, and parents that work as a team so that one of the parents can do that. That's very respectable, and
Oh,
this is something
certainly.
that feminists really get down on. This that a lot of women, like I've worked multiple jobs. I have worked full time or more all of my adult life, out of college at least, um, and uh, and I have no problem with that. But I also think that a family that makes that choice, that's able to make that choice, that's good for them,
Well,
and
I
there's
think one of the
definitely
things
nothing
that
wrong with it.
yeah, one of
It
the things that
shouldn't be forced
confuses
on anybody, but it's definitely it's something that should be an option for families, and people
yeah.
shouldn't judge them for it.
One of the things that confuses me though is that you were saying that feminists get down on this. I've heard so many people be like, "Oh yeah, take him for all he's worth. Get all the child support and alimony you can get out of him. You shouldn't have to do anything. Go, girl." But then as soon as a woman is happy in her marriage and then she decides she wants to stay at home and the husband can help facilitate that, then all of a sudden it becomes a misogynistic, patriarchal kind of situation. It's an entirely different thing, even though it's still the mom staying at home to take care of the children on the father's dollar. It doesn't make any sense. If that's something that they both agree on, then that's great. But oftentimes in the other situation, a lot of the times the father doesn't want to make that choice. He would rather take the child for 50% of the time and not have to worry about paying child support. I know that's a novel idea, having a child spend time with their father, but these days that's becoming rarer and rarer.
Yeah, and that's a shame because honestly, a lot of the reason why I'm alive right now is because of the time I spent with my dad. Dad's the one that really, like my work ethic. It comes from both. It comes from both parents in different ways, but my get up and go to work ethic comes from my dad. My dad's the one who was able to tough out watching me almost kill myself at at cross
Mhm.
country meets every week or so.
Yeah.
Um, and like it's a hard thing to watch your kid do because it was not it wasn't an easy journey, even though I loved doing it. And it was something that, it's different in every family. Sometimes the mom's the tough one, and the dad is the one that's the softy. My grandfather was like that. My grandfather was a big softy,
Mhm.
in a lot of ways, and my grandmother was the one that had to put her foot down on things quite frequently.
Yeah.
My grandmother was like Gandalf in a woman's body. I swear to you. And you got to have both. You got to have exposure to both, and it's very important. And the time the kid gets with each parent, they learn different things from the parent, and they receive assurance that helps them develop a sense of security and a sense of self from each parent that they don't get from the other one.
Oh,
And
definitely. And
this
I
is
don't think it necessarily matters whether it's the mom or the dad that has the care role, if they both work or, any other situation that could possibly spring up in the way the family works. Like, if they're all working together to try and raise a child in the best way that they see fit, then that's a great situation. But whether a woman is a stay-at-home mom or a working mom, or whether she wants to go off and be single and decides that she's had enough of the marriage, the important thing that we're discussing in this video right now is that it's her choice. It should be her choice, and if she wants to make these choices, then she should have to go by the consequences for those choices.
exactly. It should be her responsibility. And the same
Yeah.
thing, it is that way with the dad to a degree. He has less choice, but any choice he makes, it is his responsibility. And
Mhm.
that's something that um, it the inequality of it is one of the reasons I believe that we have, like some people would say, an epidemic of unwed motherhood in the United States. I mean, we have
Yeah.
we're in a position now where uh, there are more women becoming single mothers by having babies out of wedlock and not getting married than by getting divorced. And this is a choice. It's a lifestyle choice. You can use birth control. You can say no. You can pick who you are going to have a baby with, and which
Mhm.
means you choose to be with somebody that's going to stay with you, and or you choose to screw around and let yourself get pregnant, because you only get pregnant if you allow it to happen. And you let yourself get pregnant by somebody that didn't want to be a dad and doesn't want to stay. And you only let yourself get pregnant if you not only don't abstain and so on, but also either don't use sufficient birth control or don't use it properly.
Yeah.
And that's on you. And then you also have abortifacients. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. You have the morning after stuff, and then you have the 2 weeks later stuff, and then you have abortion itself, and then you have
Mhm.
safe haven abandonment, adoption, relinquishing custody, having custody of a child as a single mother, a child that you gave birth to as a single mother, is a lifestyle. There's no other way to describe it in the United States today. It is a lifestyle choice. You have made multiple choices on the way to that position. It is in no way the fault of anybody else but the mother. That's where the knock up fairy video kind of came in. Um, I get so sick of hearing feminists talk about women going through that whole list of choices and getting to, I am a single mom with custody of an infant. and acting like that was imposed. And
Yeah,
like
or like
the
it's
knockup fairy got her in the middle of the night one night, and now she has this baby, and she doesn't know what to do with it, and she can't get get any help, and she can't do anything about her situation, and she's not keeping custody of the baby because she loves the baby and wants to keep custody. She's forced into parenthood, and therefore it's her prerogative to force the father into the financial end of parenthood, but she's not necessarily obligated to share custody.
yeah. And I mean, the father doesn't really have nearly as many, if any, choices in that long string of scenarios, because right now he doesn't even have legal maternal surrender in the early stages of pregnancy. Like, a woman can get rid of it at any time that she wants, and if she chooses to, then, I guess he's off the hook unless he wanted the baby, in which case, kind of tough weenies. There's not really anything that he can do to force her to keep the baby in that circumstance. But if she wants it and he doesn't, and she decides, oh no, if only I could have seen how difficult this was going to be to do all by my onesie, then she can force him to fund her lifestyle for as long as she wants, basically. And I think that if he's forced to have that kind of responsibility, then gosh, at bare minimum, he should see how his dollars are being spent, if not have sufficient time with the child if he wants that. But that's not the way how it goes a lot of times. And I think that we should be rallying against that wherever possible, because that kind of a situation has been shown to have lots of negative consequences for the child.
Yeah, it's actually not having the father around. Having We know because there's been so much available situations. There's been such a large sample for research. We know that children raised in homes where the father is absent are more likely to get in trouble with the law as adults. They're more likely to have welfare reliance as adults. They're more likely to have difficulty forming relationships. They're more likely to have difficulty basically working and playing well with other people. They're more likely to have a reduced accountability level where they have difficulty at work, they have difficulty in all of their various activities. And it basically demonstrates that having both parents and having the influence of both parents is vital to the development of a well-rounded, healthy adult that has all of the tools that that adult needs in order to form a healthy relationship with another adult and have a good job and be able to live their life the way they want without a bunch of crap happening to them that they don't want.
Hmm.
And we don't have the research so much on mothers because there are fewer instances where children are deprived of their mother. We don't
Hmm.
have the same body of research, I should say, but there has been research that has demonstrated that children that are raised absent of their mother grow up and have repercussions as well. And they're not the same necessarily set of repercussions, but they are similar in that they grow up not having tools that they need in their repertoire of this is how I deal with circumstances involving other people. And
Yeah.
I haven't spent as much time reading and memorizing parts of that research because it's not a societal problem where this is tolerated. It's something that a woman actually generally has more recourse than a man if she ends up being alienated from her children by her ex. The only time that a woman doesn't have more recourse than a man is if the state kidnaps your children and puts them in a foster home when you haven't actually abused them. And it's just as difficult for women as it is for men to get their kids back under that circumstance because the state wants the child support that they make you pay. Um, but this is a situation where I think there are a number of benefits that society would get from affording men the same legal right as a woman to abandon parental responsibility. I don't think it's good for kids when either parent abandons parental responsibility. So I'm not advocating abandoning your kids. And I'm not in any way disparaging fathers as people who just want to abandon their kids. But if a
Of
woman did
course.
not have this cushion to fall back on, well, I can just make the dad pay child support. Women might be a little more careful about putting themselves in that situation, and putting their children in that situation. And I think that would benefit society greatly if women were more mindful, if they were as mindful as of their sexual choices as men are expected to be of theirs. We would see more intact families, and we would see fewer broken families.
Well, but that would imply putting agency back on women, and I don't know if we do that.
Yeah, yeah. And let's see. ED-D says dads don't abandon; they have kids taken. There are men whose sex partners get pregnant when the man does not want to be a father, doesn't plan to be a father, um, and is never going to live up to the responsibilities of fatherhood. There are men that really aren't suited, just like there are women that really aren't suited. The difference is when a woman does it, she's not treated like a deadbeat for it. When a man does it, he is.
Yeah.
And that's not right. The treatment should be the same for both sexes. Great Outdoors 1979 says female emancipation in the eyes of feminists seems to be. Of course, you had to send me something that's German, I think.
I think, yeah, it looks like it, yeah.
Okay, so Arbeit macht frei. I don't know. However, two-income households primarily drive up housing prices, thus making it harder to choose to be a stay-at-home mom. It is true that two-income houses or two-income families can affect inflation because people buy more,
Yeah.
and people spend more money, and the cost of living goes up and so on. But it it really kind of depends on the family.
Well, and
Ryan
plus in a lot
Field
of situations.
says, uh,
Sorry, go ahead.
Redfield writes on WordPress, poetry and rants from your favorite recreational nuke dealer. PewDiePie did nothing wrong. The fuck can't I use the URL? The reason probably is because YouTube doesn't like URLs. So we had those two chats. The first one was gave us 10 euros, thank you, and the second one gave us $6.90, I believe American. Thank you for that as well. And then we have Roswell, who gives us $5 and says, "My dad left when I was 9, despite being begged not to. Please do not say men aren't abandoning their kids to whomever that was." Joey Jojo says, "I swear, if feminists keep me from having any sort of alternative sex, I will go complete Mark Lepine. This was ridiculous. I have no other way." And that was a $5 super chat. I'm trying to remember who Mark Lepine
Uh,
was.
I'm pretty sure he's the guy who shot up that one. Oh, was it Quebec
Okay.
University?
So
I
this
don't
was
remember where the
hyperbole.
university was, but I remember that he separated the men and the women, and he shot the women, saying this is for feminism and that kind of thing. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure that
It's
that's
like the
that
one
fellow.
guy that they cite. Yeah, I don't think that anybody's actually going to do that, but I do think feminists really show their hand. They really show their hand when they go after sex dolls and prostitutes, because it's basically we own access to sex. We own access
Sex,
not
yeah,
just to intimacy, but actual physical release. And if you get it without us, shame on you. And we're going to find
yeah,
a way to. Yeah, that's definitely
it's
a.
disgusting.
That's definitely though a betrayal of the fact that for women, sex is money, and it's a threat to their income if you can get it without having to support a woman, and without having to
Yeah,
risk having to support her from a distance.
yeah, and to the other person, like, yes, there certainly are fathers who do decide that they don't want to be parents, and I don't think that any of us would claim that there aren't. But the problem is just that there are plenty of fathers who would like to be parents and are not granted that choice, and that's a real shame.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's the other thing. There's an argument that feminists make that really galls me. They'll say, well, you shouldn't be simultaneously arguing for fathers to have equally shared custody rights when you're also arguing for fathers to have the right to abandon parental responsibility. Well, women have both rights. Women have the right to be presumed the primary caregivers of their children. And feminists don't want to give that up to the point where they're treating women as victims of equally shared parenting now. And at the same time, if you started to say, well, if women are going to fight to keep custody of their children and to keep the situation where women are considered primary caregivers and men have to fight tooth and nail to get any time with their kids after a divorce, then you don't really have the right to say that women should have abortions. You don't really have the right to say that safe haven abandonment centers should exist, because obviously if you start saying women should be able to abandon parental responsibility, then you're not, you're contradicting yourself. Well, if we're not contradicting ourselves when we say women have those rights, then we're not contradicting ourselves when we say men should have those rights either.
Yeah. And plus they're completely different sets of men. Like say there's a man who is sleeping with a woman who says, um, come hell or high water, I'm on the birth control pill. I promise. I take it every day, no problem. But secretly, she hasn't been, and that happens a fair amount of the time. And he is forced into, oh my gosh, my that person that I slept with, be it my girlfriend, the one night stand, whatever, she's now pregnant, and this is a situation that I didn't want, and I was promised that I didn't have to deal with. That is entirely different from a man who is, like, say, married to somebody and who wants to consider having a family with somebody, and then eventually, shortly after having the children, the relationship goes south, she decides she wants to leave. That man is in a completely different position from the first man, and those guys are wanting different things, and it's fine to fight for both of what those guys want.
Yeah, and it is fine to fight for both what those guys want, and it's also fine to say that we should try to minimize the situation where men are put into a position where they have to decide to take parental responsibility they were never prepared for or abandon a child,
Mhm.
because that's a rotten decision for anyone to have to make. And in the end, the child is the one that's going to be hurt the most by it. Either direction, if a parent is taking responsibility for a child that they didn't want, it's very rough on the child. The way the
Yeah.
parent responds to the child is very different than, like, I knew when I was a kid that I wanted to be a mommy someday.
Mhm.
And it's always been in me. It's always been something that I've always cared about kids that were littler than me, even when I was a kid. Um, and so that was easy. That was an easy choice for me. But
Yeah.
for a lot of people, being responsible for somebody that you don't care about is very hard, and you end up with a degree of resentment that I've seen in other families. That tends to lend itself to the development of abusive behavior, even if the person's ordinary nature didn't lead to that in other circumstances. And at the same time, I've got family that had parents leave, and knowing that you've been abandoned is a rough thing. It's an extremely rough thing on the child, and there's a lot of questioning that takes place. And if the
Yeah,
child grows up in poverty because of it, that's horrible as well.
for sure.
So there's no real win from that. Um,
And plus
Moises
there's the
Salazar,
whole.
thank you for the $5 donation. It doesn't say that you said anything for me to read, but thank you very much anyway. But continuing on from what I was going to say, it does not mean that we should not make that option possible. What it means is that we need to take the steps in society that would be required for us to make that a less likely situation. One of those is, can't treat women as victims of their own choice to behave this way, their own choice to um, get pregnant out of wedlock, knowing that the father doesn't want to have a baby, and at
Yeah.
the same time, you know, there's another. women's own choices that that feminists portray women as victims of, and that is having bad character. Having bad character, or at least exhibiting bad character as an adult, is a choice. Sometimes it's a choice that gets made because there are big hurdles in the way of you having better character. It's a much harder thing to do. For anybody, it's harder, but for people that have grown up in environments where they didn't learn the tools they needed to be personally accountable and kind and compassionate, and basically exhibit the type of character that you want in a partner, it's an even more difficult thing. But it is still your responsibility. And
Yeah.
when men judge women's character, feminists treat them as misogynists, holding women accountable, holding women to a standard that you would hold a man to in terms of earning your trust and earning your camaraderie and earning your love. It gets treated as a misogynistic behavior, and that's wrong. It's not misogynistic to hold women to a standard. It's not misogynistic to not trust a woman automatically just because she's a woman. And it's not misogynistic to notice when a woman is a liar, or when a woman is irresponsible, or when a woman is unaccountable. When she can't handle uh, uh, taking responsibility for her mistakes.
Yeah.
It's not misogynistic to notice when a woman is an ingrate. These are
If
things that
anything, I
it's
would
perfectly
say,
all right.
yeah, if anything, I would say it's more misogynistic to hold women to a lower standard than you would hold men. Like that example that I gave earlier, a woman saying that she was on the pill and secretly she wasn't. If a man were to pull that in reverse and poke a hole in the condom, that would be sexual assault. Whereas if a woman does that, then, she gets pregnant, she can charge the guy for child support, and there's like nothing that he can do. So, that's not equality. And that is one thing that we're rallying against.
Yeah. And Hoki Bukisa gave us $5 twice and said twice, Moises Salazar wants you to talk about the artificial womb and how it may or may not help. Well, the problem is, it's a patch. Being able to have a baby without the mother does give men the ability to eliminate women as partners in terms of if you want to raise kids. The problem is you have the same issue with mother absence as father absence. It's better for the child to be raised in an intact home. It just
Yeah.
is. Um, it would, of course, take the monopoly away from women, which is why I call it a patch, because it would make some changes. It would make it so that uh, a man doesn't need a woman around in order to become a father, and a man doesn't have to trust a woman to become a father. And women might find themselves out in the cold in that situation. Um, and that's it's a consequence of behavior. I don't feel sorry for women under that circumstance, but it's still not as good as female accountability. Joey Jojo gives us $2 and says, "Women replaced by tech, feminist future." Well, yeah,
Kind
because
of.
if women can't be adults and men want to have relationships with adults, then or not have relationships with other people, then that's what's next. Not to say that it is the ideal future, but to say that that is where feminism is driving society, and it's something to acknowledge and mourn.
Yeah.
Let's see. And Agent Smith is saying artificial wombs will only be legally available to women who are infertile due to gynocentrism. It's quite possible that they'll be controlled, especially if feminists have their way. I could see that happening. I could see feminists like they're already fighting against sex dolls. They're already acting like that. That's, in fact, they're actually treating it as a form of rape, because that's their word for everything that they don't like.
Oh, God.
So, but yeah, the solution to this is, as I said before, the solution to this is men have to be able to stand up and vet women for character, demand accountability, refuse to just afford their trust to offer companionship and camaraderie where it hasn't been earned, and not have society come down on them for it. And that's going to take women who are accountable or who strive to be accountable, fighting for that. Moises Salazar gives us $5 and says, "Where is Karen and her booze? I miss both." Guys, I don't
She
know.
kind of seems to have fallen off the face of the earth.
And Karen doesn't miss a show when she says she's going to be here. So something must have gone wrong. And
Yeah.
my guess is she's in a situation where she had to take care of something and couldn't communicate with us before the show. And I'm not actually in a position where I can see any communications from her at this point. So she's here in spirit, but as far as anything else, she's dead to us. Just totally dead to us.
Just terrible.
Just terrible. But and as far as the topic goes, I think I've covered, I think, everything that I mentioned in the art or in the write up.
Yeah, I think we
So
talked about it all.
yep. Did you have anything else to add to this, Prim?
No, I think we basically summarized it. I think we've stitched it all up.
Alrighty. In that case, I am going to I am going to read Hoki Bukisa's live chat or super chat. Gives us $2. Karen says, "Bark, bark, 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 bark."
Dog!
And following that, I am going to shill the mix-up meetup. The details of the mix-up meetup are still available on the Feed the Badger website. And for those who haven't RSVP'd, if you are connected to me on Discord, you can contact me. If you are connected to me on Twitter, you can contact me. Look me up. It's ONEIOROSGRIP, and I'm not going to explain the name tonight, but that's my handle on Twitter, and I'll put it in the low bar of the two Badger channels after the after show tonight. But we did make the fundraiser. The the meetup is going as scheduled. We do have people who have RSVP'd for all of the parts of the meetup. So we will be at the museum. We will be at the arcade. We will be at the Renaissance Fair. And the day of the meetup, I will start giving the location of the arcade, or the name and location of the arcade, so that anybody that wants to come see us there can come as well. And aside from that, I thank you very much for listening, and have a good night all.